Let's make a boombox. All right. I'm feeling inspired today, so I already did some design work. If you were watching this as it's releasing, I released a video this morning on 3D modeling, and you can go through the playlist and find some 3D modeling videos. This is what I was able to do just with cubes and some joining and some texturing using the UV stuff. If you're not into 3D modeling, no biggie, but if you are, I'm giving this boombox away. It'll be in the Vidyuu Assets folder. And you might try splitting by texture and retexturing this yourself or creating your own UV map. Anyway, it's pretty neat, but you don't need to do any of that. This is just, it's 3 pieces. You got the body, the handle, and it's not the best. Definitely can find some better ones online, but this is a kind of fun exercise. All right, not saving that. Hello again. All right, next we're heading into Horizon where I've already imported this. I cleared the texture out just for fun. We can see we got this zebra cylinder. This feels like old school Horizon, just textures and cubes basically, which is kind of funny. But on this boombox, once you have this, I'll also put it in the asset library when we're done today. You can also swap the texture by selecting texture. And I actually have a default one on here. We'll click reset. This is that same one we were just seeing. And then if you apply a tint to it, you can change it to be whatever color you want. So you might change it to be like a super bright hot pink. It's maybe a little too much. Kind of neat, kind of fun, but yeah, you can do whatever you want there. And I think we're gonna go, why not with blue? That would be fun. Cool. All right, a little deeper blue. And then you can adjust the tint strength and brightness over here. So if you want it to be nice and dark, you could set that to 0.2, but we're gonna go with 1. And if you don't want it to fully apply, 0.5, but we're gonna go with 1. Okay, done. And also, you can swap this with any other textures you have lying around. So if you make a cool, like, zebra on zebra is probably a terrible idea, but let's say you have a zebra texture lying around. Oh, blue zebra. Oh, man. That's nice. Holy smokes, that's nice. Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, anyway, you don't do zebra on zebra, right? So if you have some other textures, you might try, like, I've got a rainbow one around here. What did I call that? Not that one. It's at the bottom of this list. Scroll, scroll, scroll. This one. Oh, did I not? Oh, because it's tinted blue. I gotta turn off the tint by setting this back to 0. And there you go. Now you can see we've got that. I just have to focus. If I can remember, is it Alt? Why do I always forget this? Nope, that's Zoom. Holding Alt. Ah, we're getting close. Holding Alt and then left click. Ah, I say that every single time, I bet you. So anyway, that looks okay. It's not my favorite in the world, but it's not bad. Not bad. It looks best from this side. It's from the back where things start to get wonky. Also true. Oh, actually underneath doesn't look bad either. But yeah, you can apply whatever texture you want. Oh, and I was going to tell you that graffiti looks really good on this. So if we have like a graffiti texture, like abstract graffiti. So like this one here looks really nice. Yeah, it's really cool. Let's go ahead and hit reset and go back to the default. There we are. And we'll apply our blue tint. Nice. So the goal with this boombox is to start with easy and build it harder and harder. So let's just say you want to simply play one track. Then we're going to build the simplest version of a boombox in TypeScript that you can build. So we're going to pull out a gizmo, the trigger gizmo. We'll put that right here on the display, so that black screen is our display. We can then trigger on players, make it selectable in screen mode so it works on cross-screen devices. We'll use the interaction prompt. There's also these other ones. There might be one for like play. Oh, there is. Play and pause. There's pause. Is there a play button? LMNOP, QR. Play should be right here, but there isn't. Oh, there's just pause. Interesting. So we're just going to use the interact because that's easy enough to use. And then what we'll do is take this trigger and make it the right size. So we'll scale this down to 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. There we are. That's looking good. And slide this in. Now, unfortunately, this will be harder to use in VR as you'll actually have to touch it with your finger, but that's kind of been a common design pattern for a long time. I'm going to rotate this so that it's kind of facing. So we'll rotate that on the red so it faces upward. Very nice. And just slide that in position. So we'll just set that right there. Now I've got a nice little trigger. We probably need some indicator to indicate that it's a play button. you know, you could go to shapes and pull out a triangle shape. So the pyramid is the one I've used in the past, but there's also the wedge. Where's our wedge? I'm like, they didn't get rid of the wedge, right? I might not be seeing it, but there used to be a wedge, which was just a triangle. Feeling kind of crazy for not being able to see it, but I am kind of racing. So let's just grab the pyramid. Perhaps we've lost the wedge. So anyway, we'll go ahead and pull this out, scale this down as well to 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. There we are. And that's starting to look a little like the right angle. We are really just going to freeform this right now. Nothing super perfect. But let's get that scaled down. So I'll grab the scale tool. Grabbing from the gray center scale tool, I can scale that to be like a play icon, stretch it out a little bit to be more like a play. And then we want to rotate this. So I'm going to rotate using this first, just to get it roughly in the right orientation. So 90 degrees on the Y, and then slide that over to there. It's a little too large on one of the axes, so I'll grab that scale tool again. That looks a little bit better. And then we want to rotate that, so let's grab our rotation tool. There we are. Nicely done. And if we slide that back into the, yeah, learning how to move on the desktop editor does take some time. Wow, that is just snapping. I don't think I have snapping turned on. That's weird. Huh, not sure why that's happening like that. Well, anyway, that should do the trick, really. We might try scaling on this axis to 0.01. There we are. Now it's a little bit flatter. And let's preview that from here. Oh, right, I'm in mobile preview. Let's go ahead and scroll out. Let's give this preview mode 3 dots, switch back to none, switch to none, and there we go, preview. All right, so we walk in. You can see that you can click E to play. It's right above the play button, which is nice. There might actually be a better icon for that, so I encourage you to play around with some of those icons we were looking at here. Back, call, overlay, capture mode, close, contract, drink, drop, eat. I don't see anything in here that to me represents play. We do have pause, which is so interesting that I don't see one just called play, but good enough. Okay, so now that we have our interaction set up and we've got our icon set up, the next thing we want to do is write a script. So let's go ahead and switch back to interact mode, selecting the trigger, 3 dots, attach script, new trigger script, which we're going to call play trigger underscore entity, create and attach. There we go. That should just take 1 second to compile. After it's done compiling, we'll then be able to hit the 3 dots edit script, which is great. I do think I forgot to I forgot to restart Horizon because it just installed an update, and so we might be getting something a little bit strange here. I'm just going to do it the old-fashioned way. Press open folder, press select folder. That should have done the trick. Yes, I trust the authors. Now I get to play trigger, and that looks good. Okay, and allow. Cool. So now that we've got this script open, stretch that a little bit. It comes with some defaults in here. We're going to do player enter trigger or player interact. Note that player exit trigger happens instantly when the mobile user uses the interact button. So it goes player enter, player exit like 1 millisecond later or less. On player enter trigger, we have the player parameter. We don't need any of their code that's in here, so we'll just delete that. We can delete the on entity enter trigger. If you're not picky, you can just leave it just like this. I am going to be a little bit picky here and change this to player enter trigger, and then change this one to match as player enter trigger. I just like it to be in my style. We'll leave the dot bind this, even though that's an older way of doing it that we don't use anymore. And if you don't know why, it's because this doesn't necessarily alert you to errors in your code. And so using the arrow function that you'll see in every other video is a way to identify errors more easily. Okay, I just got a message from Galactic, who designed the texture that we're using, and she offered to make another black and white texture to try out. Might be seeing something new here in a minute. Exciting, exciting. All right, so we got player enter tree. Player enter trigger, not tree. And so when the player enters the trigger, this is when we want to start the music or stop the music if it's currently playing. So we need to know if it's currently playing. So up here, there we go. We'll enter and create a new line called is playing, which will equal false. And then when the player is entering the trigger, we want to toggle the music. And because I want to just like teach you good naming conventions, let's create a local method called toggle music, parentheses, curly braces, and in toggle music, we will do the music toggling, but in player enter trigger, we want to simply toggle music. Now, interestingly, we can now add a little bit, an extra layer of logic here, and this is kind of like how deep do you want to dive down the rabbit hole. And if the player accidentally taps the button twice really quickly, it'll do nothing and they might not know why. My daughter, who's only 3 years old, very prone to this. She's constantly on her like iPad or whatever. She'll tap it twice and be like, "It didn't do anything, Dad, help." And I'm like, "No, just try it again, just one time." So we can help alleviate that by saying last click, and last click is going to equal 0. And the idea is that if the last click, so we'll say constant current time equals date.now, so this gets the time since the epoch in milliseconds, and if the time elapsed is less than a certain amount, we can then not do anything. So in this case, let's try if we take the last click, it's actually current time minus last click will return the amount of time that's elapsed. So current time minus last click is how much time has elapsed in milliseconds. And if that is greater than 750 milliseconds, then we will toggle the music. So that allows us to say only toggle music if enough time has elapsed. And when that does happen, we can say last click equals current time, so that way it gets updated. Now what toggle music needs to do is it needs to toggle the is playing. So it says is playing equals not is playing. So that's going to flip the Boolean from true to false or false to true. That's what the not operator does right here. And then we can use an if statement to say if is playing, and then what do we want to do? We want to play the music, else we want to stop the music. So we've got an if else here. And then we need the music. So right here in props, we'll have the music property, which will be a curly braces type prop types dot entity, so a sound gizmo of some sort. And then down here we can say props dot music dot as parentheses audio gizmo dot play. There we go. And Control C, Control V, Alt arrow down. And you can either use pause or stop. We're going to use pause, so that way it resumes where it left off. And there we go. The script is done. Simple as that. Not too bad. We'll go ahead and delete that. Press Control Save. I like double space there. Don't want to make that nice and clean. Control Save. And that script is beautiful. All right. Player play trigger. So it's a play trigger. Let's rename this script to be more clear of what it does. This is a play music trigger. And it's a pause as well. It's a play pause music trigger. And then we can change the name for this in here as well. So click rename and call this the play pause trigger. There we go. Control save. Now that that is done, we might need to reattach the script in here. Let's see if it auto renamed. It does appear to have automatically connected to the correct one. Oh, maybe not. Let's remove the script. By renaming it, we lost it. So we'll click Attach Script and reselect it. There we are. All right, so now that's something I would not rename like that later on. Only because we hadn't really done anything was that worthwhile. Now that we have the music, we need to find some music. So if we go down to Sounds, select Music, we can then find some good music. I'm not sure if they've been adding new stuff or if this is all the old one. We do have the ability to upload music now, so that's fantastic. I have a subscription to a music library that I would normally use, but because I'm going to be putting this in the asset library, I need to use something that has no copyright. So let's go ahead and grab Sugar Bites. That sounds fun. 713 also sounds fun. We'll choose whichever one of those is better. And then let's hear this one. Notice it says play on start. We'll turn that off. Global is also turned on, so we'll turn that off so it sounds like it's coming from the boombox. Volume, I'm going to set to 0.7. I haven't even listened to this yet. Maximum distance we'll set to 50, so it plays within 50 meters. And play. Oh yeah, this is a good one. It'd be pretty hard to beat that song. Let's stop that one and try our other song. Turn this off, do the exact same properties. 0.7, change this to 50, and global off. And play. Man, those are good. Yeah. This is a nice classic. I mean, both of those are really solid. We'll have a boombox that can play multiple sounds soon, but for now, we're just going to stick with this 713. And let's go scale it down nicely to like 0.1, 0.1, 0.1, just so it fits inside the boombox area. We'll then drag that down. Drag that over, drag this up, there we are, very nice. Okay, so now that we've got our music, we can now select the trigger, drag our music into the play spot, and world simulation on. I turned off play on start, so why are you playing on start? Let's try that again. Okay, I think it was like the trigger had been triggered earlier and somehow that caused it to play. Jump into preview mode, walking over, press E, press it again, and it pauses. Now if we do that twice in a row really quickly, nothing happens. So clicking twice doesn't cause any problems. You really do have to click, wait a second, click again. That's so nice. Now, I think it would be great to extend this quite a bit further. I've lost track of my boombox. Let's press that. Press F to focus. Fantastic. Like having a text display that says what the text is or what song it is. So let's start by adding a text gizmo to display what the text is or what song it is. And we know that this first one is called 713, so we'll fill it out with default 713. And I do think it would look better with bangers, so let's go with font equals bangers SDF. There we go. And we can change the size to stop being autofit. Although autofit's actually pretty nice because it's going to rescale it based on the size of the text, but it doesn't work great in some short cases. Let's use autofit off. Just don't make songs too tall. So we'll change the size of this to 1. There we go, that's better. Let's copy the rotation of the trigger and see if that's close enough. Copy rotation and paste. That is looking better. Let's scale it down on at least one of these axes. RGB, I think this one down to 0.2. Nope, wrong one. This one, 0.2. Nice, that's looking better. And then it is still reversed, so we need to rotate this 180 on the y-axis, so I'll just type 180. Eek. And that is why we're going to use the rotate tool, turn on rotation snapping, change it to 90 degrees, slowly go underneath, and boop, boop. There we go. Now we can change the size of this a little bit more using our scale tool. Remember, grabbing from the gray scale allows us to uniformly scale. That looks good. And if you're definitely just going to have one track, then just getting this to fit is probably all you need to do so it's easier to read. But yeah, that looks good. Right there, fantastic. All right, so now that that is set up, it would be nice if we could have multiple tracks. So I think that's relatively easy to do. Let's go ahead and create a new script for our audio gizmo. So we're going to click attach script, call this one, we called the first script play pause music trigger. We're going to call this play pause music track underscore entity. So it's going to have the same similar name. So it's a play pause music track. I'll have to click new script. Control A, Control C, Control V, create and attach. And then we also need a data file to go along with this. So we're going to create a same name and then underscore data file to store all of the different tracks. And ideally, when you hit pause, we have a play pause button. We probably want another button to skip track. So I'm thinking we're going to need another trigger. So let's take this trigger, Control D, slide this over to the right, then remove the script that's attached to it. So we'll click Remove Script. We're going to select our text, slide that to the center, and I think we're going to select this trigger and this pyramid, slide that over a little bit, slide it up a little bit, grab our text, try to center that just a little bit better. I am thinking it might need, perfect right there, slightly smaller, so we'll grab our scale tool, shrink that down so slightly longer track names will fit nicely. Slide that up just a hair, I think, and that is starting to look nice. I'm going to move this over to right behind here and up, just for now so it's out of the way so I can center things better. And that's looking pretty good. If I select this, I can see that the center points are aligned pretty closely. Now I can select our trigger over here, move that over. Now we're going to select the pyramid, Control D, slide this over. This is probably a bad idea to have this many objects. Might have to fix that. But anyway, we're going to take the scale of this down to 0.05 just to shrink it up a little bit and place that right there. So that's the skip track button. We're going to name this skip track trigger. We're going to name this trigger the play pause trigger. Now, it is interesting that we're running all the logic off the play pause button. I probably would have done this differently had we started with the idea of having multiple triggers, but we're just going to have this one in charge. It's fine, so that we can keep building on our original script. And we've got our text here, which is the display text. Very nice. Make sure that's spelled rightly. There we go. And we should probably start changing some of these too. So we got these two primitives, which if I create a parent, let's go create parent object. We can call this the next track models, next track custom model, and then we can change the colliding off, and light and shadow can be turned off just to make these a little bit more optimized. And then we'll go to our play model right here. There it is. And we'll go ahead and do the same thing. So turning this off, and because it's not a group, we can just call this the play pause model. There we go. I guess we're using custom model to make it more clear. So custom model. There we are. And let's see what else we got here. And we have the base. So this is like the Boombox stand. Now, I have some exciting news from the art department, aka Galactic sent me a message with some new designs for us to try out. They look kind of crazy. I'm just gonna kind of pull these up so you can see them. These look insane, Galactic. So, I guess these are from her Mid-Journey days. I like this one. I'm kind of curious how that's gonna look. So I'll click Open in Browser, and then Save Image As. We'll go into the Boombox, and we'll create a new folder called Alt Textures. The idea was to use a black and white so that you guys could tint them. So that's why we're not using any color textures. And so we'll call this one Swirls. And there we go. Open that in folder. This does need to be converted into a PNG, so 3 dots, save as, go back into that same downloads folder, Boombox, alt textures, change this to PNG, keep the same name, press save, and we can now bring that into Horizon very quickly. So I'm going to close out of this, drop some emojis real quick, fire emoji, boom. All right, minimize. Now let's head over here into Horizon, My Assets, add new texture, choose File from Device, go into Alt Textures, Swirls, Open, and Import. All right, momentarily we're gonna have this. 3, 2, 1, there it is. We can now select our boombox, and just like before, we're gonna turn off the color for now. We'll select the texture, swirls, and see how it looks. Sometimes things with uniformity aren't gonna look good because it's more organic. This UV wrap is pretty organic, so this isn't bad. I do like it. It's not bad. There's a, you can see what I mean though by it not being organic because it has kind of like an edge here for no reason. I don't know why, but there's like this fold in the UV, so it kind of looks intentional with this texture, so I think it's fine, but, and that's sick. We can turn the tinting back on, and now we got this really cool blue. That is awesome. Okay, I kind of want to do one more, and I'm thinking which one of these would look best. This is kind of cool, planets are kind of cool. Let's see. This sort of building structure is neat. Open folder, save image as, call this one a city, and then open, 3 dots, save as city, PNG, and save. City.jpg already exists. Press new. I don't want to replace it. Change this to city PNG. Make sure to select PNG. I'm not sure why it's doing that to save. Weird. Now I'm going to rename it. I don't know why it was getting all crazy with me. There we are. Close out of that. Minimize again. Go to add new. Texture. Choose files. City. Open. Import. And you can do multiple import textures at the same time. So if you had like 10 or so of these to import, you could do that at the same time. And momentarily we'll be able to try this new texture out. Momentarily. There it is. 3, 2, and boom. Whoa. Whoa. That's crazy. I really do like the kind of like organic look though. It's so neat. We're gonna go back to swirls, I think. I mean, that's so cool. Let's see how swirls looks on this. Select texture. Swirls. This one kind of stretches it a little too much. Select texture, city. Oh, it's upside down. What? You'd never know that this cylinder was upside down until you did that, which means it needs to be rotated on, I don't know which axes, so I'm just gonna guess 180. Did that? No, that did not work. Control Z. Try this one, 180. Okay, that did get it right side up. And then I'm just going to use the rotate tool so that the ugly part's hiding. That part. Nice. Cool. 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 I don't know if I like that better or worse. I don't know. It's fine. Yada, yada, yada. Oh my goodness. I'm just like, I don't know what to do. The two abstract textures are definitely competing. I can't remember what it was called, but it's a gradient. No border. Yeah, there we go. That looks better. We're just going to do that for now, okay? Back on track with the scripting. Apologies for that little detour. We're now going to add multiple tracks. So we have the script attached here for the play pause music track. Let's go ahead and 3 dots, edit this script. Oh my goodness gracious. I do need to close Horizon and reopen it because that's going to drive me nuts that it's not linking up. It's supposed to auto-link to VS Code, but when you install an update, you have to close and then reopen Horizon for that to actually work. Not entirely sure why, but alas, it's just one extra step, no big deal. All right, open up the tutorial. All right, we're back. So next we're going to go back to that music trigger, excuse me, the music file, 713, there it is. And we can actually do this to both Sugar Bytes and 713, so let's go ahead and attach the script. play pause music entity. There we are. And now let's edit the script. So 3 dots, edit script, and like it's supposed to, it opens correctly. Now, we don't need much of this. I don't like HC dot, so I'm deleting that, adding an extra space, deleting this HC dot, just little things that I do every time I open a script because I want it to look pretty and be my style. And now that we've got that set up, on start, we want to register this into the data file. So let's go to the data file and set up the data file. Deleting everything from the data file, we'll then type export constant, and I like to mimic the name. So this is play, pause, music, track, underscore data, equals, curly braces, so it's a JSON object. We're going to include one piece in here, which is a constant called tracks. And tracks is going to be a map, so equals new map of type, and I'm figuring this out on the fly, by the way. I'm just like, what should I use? Where the name is the key, so there's a string name, and then the key is, or the value is the audio gizmo itself, and curly braces to create that. What I realize now, because this is a map, I can actually create this in here. So I'm just gonna Control X and paste, swapping this out with a comma, and swapping this out with a colon. If you're making something like Shift Alt F to make it pretty, if you're making a piece of data that is like can be defined after a colon like this, then you can do that. But if you need to declare the type, you have to put it above. The thing is, I'm pretty sure this is like a let, so you could overwrite this, whereas a constant would be a little bit more optimized and a little bit less likely to break. But I know that I'm never going to overwrite this, so hopefully no one else does. Anyway, so the other way probably is a better way to do it. I don't know. I'm going to think about that. I'm going to let that mull that over in my subconscious. But for anyway, I like to make my files cleaner, so this is the reason I've been doing it this way. I don't know. There's a million ways to write code. You choose what you like. So now that we've got our tracks set up and ready to go, back on our play music track, we now need to know the name of the track. So we're going to create a new property called name, which will be of type prop types dot string. There we are. And then it's going to have a default value of nothing. So I didn't actually need to fill out the default since I decided to do nothing, but whatever. On start, we can then say the play music track data file dot tracks dot set parentheses for props dot name comma this dot entity dot as parentheses audio gizmo. What this is doing is it's saying go into the data file, find the tracks map, set in the tracks map for the name, my name, whatever the name of this track is. The value is myself, I am the audio gizmo. And so now we've saved into the data file both the name and the audio gizmo for each of the tracks. But we do need to name them. So let's head over into our tracks. Let's see, where is that? 713, so we'll type in 713, ta-da. And this one is sugar bytes, so we'll type in sugar bytes. Fantastic. And you can do that for as many music tracks as you want. So I do want to move sugar bytes into position, so I'm going to copy the scale of this, copy scale, paste that on sugar bytes, and then I'm going to copy the position of this one, copy position, oops, Control Z, copy position, and then paste right here, and then grab my move tool and slide that up. So they're both right here, so they should sound like they're coming from the Boombox, which is good. Now, with that set up, the next trick is I'm realizing I might have wanted to use an array instead of a map, because an array you can iterate through, which we can't with a map. So, let's just write some more code and then we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So we need to connect the code block event, and we're going to Control C, Control V. So we're going to connect the code block event also for player to trigger, but not for this .entity, it's for the other trigger. So we need another property, so Control C, Control V. This is the skip track. This is the skip track trigger, and it's of type entity as well. Control save. Let's go into Horizon and reference that before I forget. So selecting the trigger right here, and then referencing the skip track trigger. There we go. Now with that referenced, we can then utilize that as the thing that we're connecting to. So props dot skip track trigger. You'll notice this gets upset because it could be undefined on the properties panel. So we need to say if props dot skip track trigger, curly braces, alt arrow up. And then over here, this is currently connecting to the player enter trigger. That is an option, but we're not going to do that. We're going to say create a new local method called player. In fact, I think we're going to rename this one to play pause trigger, and this one will be called next track trigger, parentheses player colon player, oopsie, player, there we go, curly braces. All right, so we got our play pause trigger, we got our next track trigger, and we now need to change the name of this to this one is the play pause trigger, and this one is the next track trigger. So now these are both connected to the local methods here. Now with those set up, we can say in next track, we need to switch to the next track, but we need to know which track we're currently on. So we're going to say current track equals 0. And we want to do the same thing with our current time. And I'm thinking this one is a little bit more finicky because you might want to quickly go through them. So you might be clicking to get through. So maybe we won't do a check for double clicks because you might actually be intentionally double clicking to get to the next track if there's like 20 tracks or something. Okay, so toggling music. Now the problem is that the data file, a map, is not an array, and only an array can you get the index or the item at an index. So what we're going to do is bring this back, constant tracks, and tracks is going to be defined as a bag of stuff with a track name, which will be a string, and it will also have the music, which is really an audio file, so audio Gizmo, which will be of type audio Gizmo, and that will be an array of that type, and then it'll equal an empty array. And then we just need to remove this right here. So now we've defined tracks inside of our bag of stuff as this constant. And now back on our initializing of that on play, it's no longer set, it's dot push. And then when we're pushing, we need to put these two elements inside of curly braces. So we put curly braces, and then we can type track name colon, and this one is the audio Gizmo colon. Shift Alt F to make that pretty. And so what you can see here is we're going into the data file, we're going into tracks, which is now an array. And we can see what the array is. We're pushing, meaning we're adding to it with a new JSON object, so that's the curly braces. The first item that we're adding is the track name, and the value of track name is this .props.name. The audio Gizmo has the value is this value. Okay, so that is just a slight change there. And what that'll allow us to do is to toggle our current track. So next track trigger needs to say, eventually, it needs to say current track plus plus. Except the way that I like to toggle is not using this. I use actually equals current track plus 1, put that in parentheses, and then type modulus. Then you go to the data file. So we type, I'll just type data and then find the play pause music track data, dot tracks, dot length. And so what modulus does is it says when this value equals the length, go back to 0. And if it's greater than the length, it returns the remainder. So if you're adding more than one at a time, like say 2 at a time, and you went over by 1, it returns 1 because it's returning the remainder. Anyway, it's complicated. We're not going to super heavily discuss it, but very, very cool feature that allows you to cycle through the tracks. And we want to do that at the very end and the beginning. So let's Control-C, Control-V. And what are you talking about? So we're going to change this to be a constant. We're going to say constant next track equals this value. And then at the very end, we're going to change current track to be next track. What this allows us to do is say in that play pause data file dot tracks, we can get the current value by typing square brackets and then type in current track. So we've now gotten the current track. Then we can say current track dot audio gizmo dot stop. That is going to stop the track. We could pause it, but that doesn't really make sense in this case due to the fact that it is a that there are multiple tracks now, so pausing doesn't make as much sense. And the next thing we need to do is play the next track. So Control-C, Control-V, change this to be next track, and then instead of stop, we're going to say play. And so this stops the previous track and then plays the current track. And then if they click the button again, it'll stop that. It'll stop it and keep going. So that works. The one thing that we still need to do is update the text on the text gizmo. And so we have not referenced the text gizmo yet. So Control-C, Control-V, call this the text display. There we go. Let's reference that in Horizon before I forget. So we've got our display text right here. That should appear momentarily. 3, 2, and 1. There it is. Fantastic. Now with that set up, heading back into VS Code, we can utilize it by typing props.textDisplay.as parentheses text gizmo.text.set parentheses. And we were using the font bangers, so we're going to start by typing in the code for font. So font equals bangers SDF. And then we're going to add to that. So we say plus the data file. So we're going to the play pause data file dot tracks dot, square brackets, current track. This is actually next track, right? So next track dot track name. All right, so we've gotten the track name. We've applied our font to it. If you want to know more about fonts and what is available, you can head to the text documentation, text entry tutorial. You'll find this on the Learn website. And in here, you got the text formatting cheat sheet right there. So feel free to pause if you want to grab any of those fonts. Oh, those are font materials. Here are fonts, gradients, and yeah, this is a cool tutorial found on the Learn website. So feel free to check that out. Okie doke. With that set up, let's see, what else am I missing? I think we are just about done with this. Dun, 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 dun. Thinking. Got our play, we got our play pause button, we've referenced everything. We've got 2 tracks to try. World simulation on, preview mode, head on over. Music's on. I clicked the skip. There we go. I had to click it twice for some reason. Oh, I see what I did wrong. I was trying to figure it out. Head back into the code. We'll select the trigger, 3 dots, and edit. If you caught this, great job. But if you didn't, I didn't either. So under toggle music, we were just using the music track from the properties panel. So we actually need to delete this property. That's going to bring up the errors because we're no longer using that. And so toggle music now needs to reference the music file. So we can go to the play data file dot tracks square brackets and then grab item at current track. We can then delete this dot as audio gizmo because it is an audio gizmo. And then we can duplicate this. Why is that not going to stop play? Oh, because we have to select the track. So dot audio gizmo dot play. Control-C, Control-V, move that down. Change this to pause. There we go. And control save. Okay, so that's going to toggle the music and should be the entire solution. Give that a second. World simulation on, jump into preview mode, walking over, skip to next track. You can't read this on mobile, which is disappointing, and I'm not seeing it switch track. Oh, look, it's automatically playing when I switch track. Oh, right. Because if you're skipping track, you need to be able to hear it. That makes sense. And then pause. Pause. I see. Okay, so one more easy to fix bug. When we change the track, we are playing the track. And so what we need to do is decide if we want to change that. I'm kind of thinking, let's not change that. Let's say if, parentheses, is playing, then curly braces. If it's playing, then we do this. And if it's not playing, then we don't need to do anything. It just changes the current track and updates the text. So that makes sense. Super easy. The next thought in my mind is that it's way too hard to read this. So there might be an easier, no, there really isn't. We have to use custom UI for mobile. You can get around this to some extent if your world is very heavily VR focused or built with a lot of code blocks by changing this from third person to first person. And so if we go world simulation on and preview, it's now way easier to read this. Still works nicely. Kind of gives you that VR experience a little bit. Sugar, I don't know why I have to click it twice. I'm like really curious. I'm gonna have to like look into that. Oh, because they're added out of order and there's only 2 tracks. So we need to update on world start to select track 0. So I just selected Sugar Bites. It's not playing though. That play pause button is giving us a little bit of trouble. There it goes. It's so strange that it doesn't work immediately. Pause. Okay, that worked. Pause. Everything's working. Skip. Just feels like it's not set up right on world start somehow. Let's try to adjust this. On start, let's make sure that the text is updated. And an easy way to do this would be to actually just call next track trigger. Very hacky. Very, very hacky, but if we just call next track trigger, it wants a player. We don't actually use the player at this point, so we can type player or undefined. This is, we're getting into super hacky area. I'm gonna undo this. This is something, if I was in a rush, I would have wrote it like this. We are not in a rush. We can take an extra second. What we really need to do is just update the text display. That's all we actually need to do. So Control-C, Control-V, Alt-arrow this up, and put that in world start. We can then delete this. We can then delete this undefined, because that's going to add more work later if I want to use the player. So it just doesn't make sense. And so then instead of using next track, we can change this to current track, Control-Save, and that works. But we can make this even better by saying after toggle music, we can create a local method called update text display, parentheses, curly braces. We can then move this one down. So I'm gonna hit Control X. I'm gonna press Enter and call the local method update text display real quick. Because we're doing this in 2 places, we can now move that to here, and that way we don't have to write the code twice. Now this one was calling the next track, so we're going to actually close this one down, and we're going to update the display after we set the next track. So we're going to then call update text display now that the current track has been updated. And that should do everything we need. Dun, 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 dun. If it's greater than 750, work. Okay, yeah, all this looks good. Let's go. For whatever reason, I don't like the gray ones up here, so I just delete them. So silly. Clear. It should only take a second to compile. Clear. World simulation on. got an error on start. I think I made a minor miscalculation. If you open up the track entity, I put this in start. I should have put this in pre-start. So let's quickly fix that. Pre-start is guaranteed to happen before the start method of everywhere else. And we need this to happen before the start method. So that way, you know, it's there when we call start. So control save. And let's give that a go. So clear, wait a second. And clear, world simulation on, preview. All right, so we can switch to track. Look at that, working good. And then we can play. Still not working on the first click, or the second, or the third. That's weird. That is really weird. Why is that not working on the first track? Click. And then it just works perfectly after that. That suggests to me that there's something weird happening on world start, but I can't think of anything. It's just a Boolean that's set to false, right? Let's look at the code. Let me read through the logic in my head and see if there's something obvious. So by default, it's set to false. Then you press the play pause trigger, and it says current time's calculated. I ran through this in my head already. That's fine. We then call toggle music, and we set the last click to the current time. Toggle music, all of this runs, because it's all in order, this runs before this, so that's not a problem. Is playing is set to not is playing, so it goes from false to true. If it's true, we play the audio gizmo. Else, we pause. I'm almost willing to be like, this is a Horizon bug. Like, this just doesn't, everything seems right. Current track, yeah. This all seems set up correctly. Just to verify, let's go console.log parentheses play control save. I feel like if I left the world and came back, it would be working. And I have one other test we can do to just verify that it is working as intended. So world simulation on, preview, walking over, hitting play. It says play on the console, but we're not hearing anything. Pressing it again is going to pause. That's why it takes the third click. So that's the pause. Then I click it again. Now it's playing. Doesn't make sense. Let's interesting. It's like each track is having this problem. So it's playing right now, but it's not. So if I hit pause and then play, and so once every track has been played, it works correctly. That just feels like Horizon bug. Like all the logic is working as I would intend it. Let's go ahead and remove the console log since it is doing what I expect it to do. And one of the ways I can test is by going to the website Worlds, and you'll see the build that we're here. I can click preview version 0, and I've been doing this quite frequently recently because build mode has been just so unstable, especially with custom UI. And so I can quickly check things out and see how they're working in the published version. Now this is supposed to represent the published version, and I'd say like 8 months ago it did, but more recently there's a lot of discrepancies, and I've been finding errors that happen only in the published version don't happen in here, so All right, let's try this out. The play button worked, and it works first time. Clicking to the next track. Yeah, so it's just a Horizon bug. Good to know. We can then also try leaving and coming back. So if we go to return to creation home, when we come back, it might be working. I just don't know how to explain it. Something weird. But sometimes leaving and coming back does help. Okay, and we are almost to an hour in this video. So I'm thinking what we need to do, in part because I'm getting a little bit exhausted, is we need to save the rest of this Boombox tutorial, the custom UI portion of this, for another day, because custom UI is even harder. World simulation on, preview, walking over. Yeah, that works. So it just was leaving and coming back. Nice. I don't know, I'm having fun with that. So cool. So there you have it. There is some like basic DJ controls on a Boombox. Obviously there's a lot more you can do. You can add a lot more tracks. I'm going to put this in the asset library so you can pull it out. The scripts I can put online as well. But as you can see, they're pretty straightforward, pretty short scripts. So let's, I'll do that after the video's over. Okay. Whew. It's a hot day. We're back to hot days. But, whew, I am excited. We'll get to this custom UI tutorial, probably not today, maybe tomorrow, maybe the next day, maybe later this week. I'm not really sure. I do think the Boombox custom UI is a great starting point because it's just 3 buttons. So you got a button, a display, text display, and then another button. There might be more buttons than that. We might add like a volume control if we go crazy. But the problem is custom UI is very hard. And so I wanted to start before we delve into custom UI by showing you how easy it is to use text and triggers to basically do the exact same thing. The biggest problem is you can't support cross screens. It's like really mostly for VR. And notably, the icon only appears on cross screens. So it works, like the icons work great on cross screens, but the text display doesn't. It's difficult, guys. It's difficult. And then in VR, you have to actually push the button. And we didn't add haptics or sound effects. Like you'd want a button tap sound effects. You'd want some haptic feedback so the VR user can feel it. There's so much more that would need to go into this to like really polish it. But this will get you started. And dang, that's usually a reason I don't want to put it in the asset libraries if it's not polished and finished. I guess we need to finish it. Here we go. One or two more minutes. Here we go. It won't be hard. We don't need that. Back in the script, we have our play pause trigger script, and we need a couple more entities. Control C, Control V. We need the tap sound effects, which is an entity, and the other thing that I was saying was we need haptics. I guess that's not another thing. Okay, so we just need to tap sound effects. When they press any button, we need to play button click sound effects. And the easiest way to do this, I want a local method because of the haptic feedback. So at the very bottom, I'm going to say play tap effects, parentheses, curly braces. We will need the player who tapped. So we'll pass in the player parameter, which will be of type player. And then we can then say props dot tap sound effects dot play or dot as parentheses audio gizmo, and then dot play, and then parentheses, and then we need to play haptic feedback on the player. It would be nice to know which hand is closest to the trigger, so we'll do that as well. Why not? We'll make it good. Comma, position, vec3, and then we need to know the distance. So we say if parentheses the position dot distance parentheses to the player dot right hand dot position dot get. Come on, I hit the wrong key. My bad. Dot get, and if that is less than the position dot distance parentheses to the player dot left hand dot position dot get, we know that if the distance is less, if it's closer to the right, then it was the right hand that touched. So we can then play haptics on right, else we'll play haptics on left. I do have a utility that makes this a little bit easier, but for now I'm going to write it out because this is going to be a self-contained file. And so to play haptics, we say player dot right hand dot play haptics parentheses. The duration will be 350 milliseconds. The strength is going to be pretty weak, so we'll type haptic strength dot medium, and the sharpness will be let's see, I'm thinking soft because you're kind of like pressing a button. There we go. And then we're missing any properties? I don't think we're missing. Hover. Looks good. Control C, Control V, Alt arrow down, and change this from right hand to left hand. There we go. So now we're playing haptics based on which hand is closest, but we haven't actually called the play tap effects method. So if we go to the play pause trigger and the time is greater than, then we will say play tap effects parentheses for the player, and we need the position, which is the play pause trigger position. I'm going to save these on world start and say play pause trigger position equals vec3.0, and then we'll Control C, Control V, and change this to the next track trigger position. And then on start, we can say play pause trigger position equals this.entity.position.get, because we're running on that trigger. Control C, Control V. And for the next track trigger position, we can use the props dot tap skip track trigger. Skip track trigger. Now this could be undefined, so I just add a question mark question here, vec3.0. So this basically will not work correctly if the trigger is not defined, but at least the code is clean and easy to write. We can then say on play pause trigger, we can pass in the play pause trigger position, semicolon, Control C, Control V, move this down to the next track trigger, which we're going to play every single time, but we need to pass in the next track trigger position, and that allows us to calculate the position to the player. Fantastic. Okay, I think that does it. We just need to go get a tap sound effect. So, wrong one. Here we are. Let's go to build, go to sounds. There's actually one called tap, button tap, there it is. We'll put that right here in the center so the sound comes from the right location. We'll change the scale to 0.1, 0.1, 0.1 so it's nicely scaled. Going to move it back just a little bit so it doesn't block the view in build mode. And then this is the button tap sound effects. Fantastic. We'll click on the trigger, reference the button tap sound effects. There we go. And we can now make sure to set the sound properties for this to be nice, like 0.6 on the volume. Distance should only be about 15, so it's not, getting in other people's way. We can hear that by hitting play. Nice. Go ahead and world simulation on, preview, walking over. That feels so much better, and you'd feel haptic feedback if you were pressing that in VR. Oh, that's not working again, but works the third time. All right, perfect. Fan-freaking-tastic. That is very, very nice. If you want a challenge, for anyone looking for challenges, I would encourage you to try making it play on start. And I think it's one change there, like one change on the properties panel and one change in VR, or in the, in the code. So one change on the properties panel and one change on the code would make it work. Pretty confident. But you could also write like 3 or 4 lines of code to get it to work. Might be able to get it done in 2. Yeah, maybe even just 1. I actually think I found a way to do it in 1 line of code. Like, you could either change 1 line of code and change a property on the properties panel, or add 1 line of code. So don't overcomplicate it, but there are multiple ways to get the same solution. So try it out. Making it play on start might be something fun, depending on like what type of environment you're building. Okay. All right, next time we'll build this in custom UI. As I was mentioning, it's much more difficult. We spent an hour on this. That might be 2 hours. And we might be using bits of this code. Like, I think ideally the custom UI is just sending the trigger events. So the button tap calls like a manager trigger. So we'll convert our trigger into a manager. I'm thinking that's going to be the methodology. You could potentially run it on one thing. I don't know. We'll think about it when we get there. But yeah, custom UI is hard. All right. See you then. Bye.